Bon après-midi, mesdames et messieurs. Buenas tardes, señoras y señores. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ICAO's 40th Assembly SkyTalks. My name is Sung Kim, and I'll be your MC for this event. Now, in the next 2 weeks, we have 67 SkyTalk presentations for you from aviation professionals here at ICAO and in the private industry. So far, we've had some great presentations in gender, cargo, education, air navigation and safety. I welcome all of you to get into the YouTube and go into the ICAO channel to find out more about the presentations that you missed. I'd like to remind you also that we're coming to you live, so please make sure to put your cell phones on vibrate mode. And during this presentation, or at the end of the presentation, I'll leave it up to each individual speaker. Should you have any questions, please make sure to come up to the mic here and ask away. Now, we've covered a lot of different topics so far, but now we are coming into some of the more important topics, not more important, but very hot issue regarding environment specifically. We have Jane Hupe, the Deputy Director of Air Transportation Bureau and Director of Environment, who will discuss Global Coalition for Sustainable Aviation. Without further ado, Jane Hupe. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. It's, in fact, the first of 9 talks that we will have that will be related to environmental protection and aviation. We will, after the session that gives you an overview of what we do and how we see the next steps, we'll have specific sessions that will be dealing with some of the most important topics that we are working on right now here in ICAO. So, we basically have 3 main topics that we dedicate our efforts in terms of aviation and the environment. And we have started to work on those topics since the 60s, so it's not from yesterday. We have the first big topic that we started addressing was aircraft noise. The second one that came into our attention was the effects of our operations, aviation operations, on local air quality. And after that, then came climate change. I know that a lot of the interest out there right now is about aviation and climate change. We have just came back from New York, where they were holding the climate summit until yesterday. We have listened in the streets of the entire globe, the youth calling for more action on environment. And we are here in ICAO right now dedicating a lot of action as well to address all the impacts of aviation on environment, but specifically on climate change. Lately, we have done amazing progress in acting to address mainly CO2 emissions from aviation. So environmental protection is one of the strategic objectives of this organization, and our objective is really to limit or reduce the number of people affected with significant aircraft noise, limit or reduce the impact of aviation emissions on local air quality, and also limit or reduce the impact of aviation greenhouse gas emissions on the global climate. This specific strategic objective contributes to 14 out of the 17 United Nations SDGs. It's in many shapes or form. Our work is connected, for example, with SDG 13, which is climate change. We connect with health. We connect with many different of those SDGs. So how do we address the impact of aviation on the environment in the organization? So it takes many shapes and forms, but basically the important work that we have, mainly during the assemblies, and today our assembly is starting, is to establish the policies that will drive us in the future to address those issues that are now very important. So This week, we'll be addressing in the Assembly 3 important Assembly resolutions. Our Assembly resolutions is where 193 states come together and say, this is the policy that will be driving us in the upcoming years on aviation and environment. So the first of these Assembly resolutions that we will be now looking at is dedicated to overall aspects, but much more on noise and emissions, and it talks about the standards, talks about how we deal with the policy on noise, etc., etc. The second Assembly resolution, it's about climate change, and it's an overarching policy on climate change. It sets the goals that we have in the organization for climate change. It sets what are the measures that we will be using to address climate change. And then we have the third Assembly resolution, which is specific to one topic, and is CORSIA, the global scheme that we have for international aviation for offsetting and reduction of CO2. And we will be talking about that. So that is the overarching policy that we have in the organization that will drive our work in the next triennium. Then, something else that's very important to us, and if you have taken a flight to come here to attend the Assembly, we were flying more than 12,000 standards that this organization has put together. So next time you step into an aircraft, you say, oh my God, I'm just stepping in more than 12,000 international standards right now. And bear with me, it's not easy. It's 193 states that have to agree with those standards, and they have to be prepared in consultation to a lot of stakeholders. So the aviation industry, in our case, environmental protection is the environmental NGOs, the airports, the airlines, the manufacturers, the air navigation service providers, other UN sister organizations. They work with us in preparing those standards that are then approved by our member states. And we have the Convention on International Civil Aviation that we call the Chicago Convention, and it has annexes that contain those standards. For environmental protection is Annex 16. And we used to have, well, first was Annex 16, and it was noise in the 60s. Then they divided Annex 16 in 2 volumes, one for noise, one for local air quality emissions. And when I say standards that are in there, those standards are to certify the aircraft for noise. So if you're flying an aircraft, again, if you took a flight to come here, in that flight, in the cockpit, you have a certificate that says this is the noise category of that aircraft, and it has to comply with the standards to get that certification, okay? You don't fly internationally without being certified by noise. You don't fly internationally without a certification for engine emissions. You don't fly internationally. Yeah, well, the last in town was a global CO2 standard. It's volume 3 of the Annex 16 now. And it's, bear with me, we had the standard for new aircraft, but we also had the decision to apply the standard to in-production aircraft, which means aircraft flying there that want to certify for CO2, they will have to comply with that standard if they want to fly. So that is the certification of aircraft. And the really new kid in town in terms of the standards to Annex 16 was Annex 16 Volume 4, which was CORSIA, all the standards that we had to put in place for the global offsetting scheme. So, of course, you have those standards in the Annex 16, and you have many accompanying documents that are more related to the how-to. So Annex 16 will tell you, state, you have to do that. And then the accompanying documents say, guys, that's how you do it. Here are options on how to. So those are the guidances that we have. It's the technical manuals, guidance in many different forms. And lately, we have seen that the pace of innovation, the pace of development in environmental solutions was so quick. And the pace of the production of those guidelines have to keep up with it. So we have what we call our Echo Kit, which is now publications. There are electronic publications on the website that talk about, amazing solutions that you can have for green airports. If you want to talk about recycling, circular economy, all of that. But, we have our manuals on how to do land use planning around airports, many different guidances that come in this third category that we call ICAO guidance, things that tell you how to or give you best options on how you could do and take action on the environment. Now, I talked about, we are going to switch gears to climate change now, and I'm going to talk about something that happened in 2010. And I always tell that 2010 was when we really passed the page on aviation being sustainable. And in that year, we had an assembly meeting where we decided the goals for climate change. And we set two aspirational goals. One was 2% annual fuel efficient improvement. So you have the orange, and we have now an orange that's already 80%, more fuel efficient. And then every year we said we are continuing to squeeze it and take 2% more fuel efficient from that. So it's 80% that we are more fuel efficient since the first jets. And now every year there is this commitment to be 2% more fuel efficient. It's not an easy commitment, but that's the aspirational goal that we put for this industry. In addition, we said, okay, what we need to do is aviation has such a vital role in society, and everybody's asking for more access to aviation, to be able to connect the global community. This is a one world, and we need to be connected. So aviation is growing. And we have this commitment from 2010 that we will continue to develop aviation, but we will not anymore grow CO2. So we put a line, and we said it's going to be carbon neutral growth from 2020. Bear with me. We have here, heard so many people coming and say, oh, this go, and this was a lot of words in the wind. That's not it for us. In this organization, when we say we are going to do, we do, and we put a roadmap, and we go for it. So what was said in 2010 is prepare under a roadmap how you're going to get there. And we said there's a basket of measures here, technology, operational measures, sustainable aviation fuels. And guys, if we don't get there, then anything that goes beyond the line is going to be offset. At the time, we said it's going to be a market-based measure that will take care. And then we start a lot of discussions. And we had so much progress since, and in the 4 elements. And just to mention, since we had the first CO2 standard approved, we are, seeing a unprecedented development in everything that is electric and a hybrid. Many announcements already of aircraft flying, and even regional aircraft by 2030 already. So we will be working very hard to certify those aircrafts to be ready for international flying. We had, from operational improvements, those that have been following the news, we had an announcement from ACI of already many airports that are saying we will be carbon neutral. We have a carbon neutral commitment from now onwards. A lot of green technology was put forward in these latest years. We had the air navigation plan, where it talks about the implementation of operational measures. And we have put a lot of tools to make sure that when we were considering operations that were more direct, that could really be more efficient from A to B, instead of going like this, we go more directly. We really improve our way we can also calculate what's the environmental benefit. So we are quantifying all of that, and we have to say that the really most incredible development that we saw was in sustainable fuels. We, in 10 years, since we had our first conference, where we had a few flight tests and people were saying, what is really what that you're talking about, drop-in fuels? You're producing fuels from something else and putting inside the engine to fly? You're going to fly with used cooking oil? You're going to fly with waste, wood waste? You're going to... And we are saying, yeah. And we have certified all those paths to really produce the fuel that is exactly with the characteristics that we have with our jet fuel that can be mixed in the engine. You don't have to change the engine. You don't have to change the airport. It's really a lot of work. In this 10 years that passed by, we now have more than 200,000 flights that are using sustainable fuels. And, it's really an industry that is growing incredibly. And last but not least, we had this talk about, well, if, the rest, we have to do something. And we have considering, and we have discussed, and people talked about taxes, then people talked about emissions trading, and what is the best solution? And we had what we call the GLADs, which were big discussions all over the world, 2 years in a row, consulting with everybody. And we came out with the following conclusion. We want something simple, easy to implement, and that is most cost-effective, that we can really measure the environmental benefit, that we can really do a good monitoring, reporting, and verification. And that was CORSIA. On top, we said it cannot be just an offsetting. It has to be some elements of reduction. So we also include a policy within this policy of within the scheme that says if an operator uses sustainable fuels, we will calculate that benefit, and you can deduct that benefit before you offset. So there is an entire mechanism within CORSIA also for reduction. So, guys, you will have just after this talk, entire talk about CORSIA. So I'm not extending too much, but let me just say a few words more so that you know where we were in CORSIA. So as I talked about SAF, I would invite you to look at our website, because some of you might be looking at me and saying, okay, Jane, 200,000 flights on sustainable fuel, really. And not only we are accounting with all of that, but we are showing to you in real time, every time that a flight is taking off, that contains some of that fuel. So if you go to our website and you click, you'll see in real time those aircraft moving from some airports to other airports that are containing sustainable fuels. You click on the flight and you can see what flight, using what fuel. So it's real, guys. It's today, it's now. And we now need to escalate the amounts of fuel. We have to really put it in a competitive price because it's more expensive still. And we have to escalate, the production. We have to address the price. Now, we have done a lot of studies to see how much, where we could go with sustainable fuels, and it can do a lot. It can do a lot. So we have many possibilities and scenarios for sustainable fuels. And in 2017, we had a second conference where this was already a reality, and we came out with the ICAO vision, the ICAO Vision 2050. At the time, we were not able to quantify, because we want to quantify and say that's the amount, and those are the possibilities. If we do all of that, that's the amount we can get. And since we had taken a decision at that conference to do what we call the stock taking, so every year now we get together, we have a questionnaire to all states, our partner organizations, and we look and we take stock of where we are on sustainable fuels, and we find ways that we can further progress. I said that I just came back from the UN Summit on climate change, and there was an announcement by industry that they were getting together to really, really push, together with producers, WEF, and other organizations. They were pushing for alternative fuels. All of those measures are very important, and you will see at the end how we do the next steps. So, we talked about CORSIA, an MBM scheme, but we look at CORSIA as a complementary measure. We are a technology-oriented industry. We had made real the miracle of flying, and we do believe we will have the necessary technology to be sustainable in the future and reply to this generation saying the next generation will have access to sustainable travel. And that's why we said that CORSIA will be here until we cannot really fulfill that vision with all the other elements. And we have put together then that scheme. We'll be reviewing it, but we really believe that by 2035, we might be able to get there without CORSIA from there onwards. But let's see. The progress on CORSIA was incredible. Usually, a new standard, a new volume, a new annex of the Chicago Convention, that would take at a minimum 10 years to be developed. It's a crazy amount of work. And we had a decision in the last assembly 3 years ago. You have to put all of that in place in such a way that on the 1st of January, 2019, operators will already start collecting the information on CO2 and say, oh, hold your horses. Hey, everything that we do has to become a standard. We have to adopt the standard. All the states have to put that standard inside their national regulations, and then they can go and ask the operators to implement. So we said, okay, we have to do something different. And we did. We progressed on the standards, but at the same time, we start progressing in all what we call implementation elements. So we start working on a tool, and the tool was ready in no time and available to all states so that they could calculate their emissions. It's the CERT. It's available to all of you. Then we worked on the central registry. Right now, we have the pilot registry that's being tested, and in there you have already almost 700 operators that are registered with their in that registry. You see each state, what are the operators, et cetera, et cetera. Then we are talking about the eligible fuels and all the standards so that you could calculate how to deduct within CORSIA, and that included a lot of discussions on the sustainability of the fuels, et cetera, et cetera. And also, we are right now in a process of assessing units that will be eligible under CORSIA for the offsetting, okay? And to do all of that, we have to do a lot of work with our states and with the operators. So we start really doing outreach with them. And we came out with something that's called Act CORSIA. We have trained in 4 months, basically, more than 100 states. How do you do that? With something that's new and there's no experts ready to be hired out there? You have to call on the states that have participating in that process for those states to help the other states get ready as well. So in no time, we had 15 states that step up and came to help the other 100 states that we trained. That was one of the most beautiful initiatives for No Country Left Behind, which is a big, big, big initiative of this organization. And it was super successful. We are already in the second phase of that at CORSIA, and it's the best of the UN, one state helping another state. So here we have really a very successful implementation of CORSIA because of the way states have implemented Act CORSIA. But make no mistake, operators had to be ready as well. And industry stepped up strongly, and at the same time we were training our states, industry was training their operators to be ready. So all of that had to come together to be a very successful CORSIA implementation. Now, this is not all. In 2010, we also decided on the action plans. Is our bottom-up approach, so that each state could be prepared and understand their reality and the measures that will be more available for them to address CO2 emissions. And I'm very pleased to tell you that by now we have 116 states that have done their action plans, and they are revising their action plans. And we see 2020 as a year there where we are going to have a lot of action plans being updated, because it's when we are implementing CORSIA, so they have that element that they can quantify it very clearly, which is under CORSIA reporting, and they will see what else they can contribute even more on the other elements in their state. And they choose measures, they see what's the necessary support they need, and we try to connect the funding, we try to connect partners that can really help them. And that's on itself. We have even a UNITAR course for the action plans that we do with our sister organization, which is the UN University. So we train, we have so many focal points that we have been training on and on, so that they understand the emissions, they understand all of that. And that has prepared our states to be able to do CORSIA. And also on those state action plans, we really had a lot of capacity building happening. And we also had some pilot projects done. So we had, with the European Union, we had trained 14 states. They have developed their action plans, they have put together their structures. And the most important thing on the action plan, guys, is not the paper, it's not the document itself. It's to create that dynamic within the state where the authority, aviation authority, sits with the energy groups, sits with the airlines, sits with the airports, sits with the air navigation, because the data is there. And you just have to put it together so that you understand your data, your aviation data, you collect it on a very effective manner, and you discuss the measures you can take, and the synergies that come out of that is something amazing. So what was really important in this action plan was to create those structures within our states that now are ready to implement and act on the environment and act on climate change. We also did something with UNDP and GEF. And, for example, we did a pilot in Jamaica that is a solar panel that feeds with solar energy the gates. So while the aircraft is on the ground, it's fed by solar. So 45 minutes for a domestic flight, 2 hours sometimes for an international flight using solar, no more the fuel on the APU. So that's super cool. And that project, because it was in an island, was the first solar that we did that was Cat 6 resilient. So if a hurricane comes, the solar panels will continue there. So guys, we have linked adaptation and mitigation and clean energy. This is what we have to do to act on aviation, on environment. And we have many more very good examples. We did feasibility studies in those states for sustainable fuels. It's not a one-fits-all. What's good for one state is not possible in another, but all of them have this huge potential in this transformation towards clean energy, and we have to look into that. There's no point in having electric aircraft if then you're going to feed that aircraft with energy coming from coal. So we have to talk about the entire energy grid so that we really move sustainable in the future. So 2 days ago, we started our innovation fair. There was a contest here for a youth, and we did not request that the projects had to be sustainable or green. Or happened that the 5 top were all green projects. That sends you the message of how this new generation is looking at aviation in the future, a sustainable air transport. And the Innovation Fair brought so many, novelties on sustainable fuels, the sources of fuel, the electric aircraft, this urban mobility. Going to the airport now, we are going to use sustainable transport. It's the entire chain. So this is really something amazing that's happening. So that leads me to the climate action. The UN Secretary General 1 year ago called on all the UN, call on states, call on industry, call on civil society to move and come yesterday with actions. He called for coalitions. Coalitions in the sense of partnering states, industry, all the stakeholders, new stakeholders. Guys, we have been doing that in ICAO for 75 years. It's our anniversary now. And that's the heart of this organization, is to partner with all our stakeholders to construct a very good civil aviation. So for us, it was a no-brainer to come and prepare for to tell our story and to talk about the next steps, how we can even further accelerate our story under what we call a Coalition for Sustainable Aviation. So it's this global coalition on sustainable aviation. It has the clusters that I explained to you. But what we need now is to see means of accelerating, putting together amazing partnerships that are happening. For example, we saw now Norway with a regional airline and Rolls-Royce talking about carbon zero electric aircraft by 2030 being used in Norway, substituting the fleet. We have seen, announcements from airports, manufacturers, new fuel producers coming with sustainable fuels. All of that can be amalgamated in a big action that will lead us to a global future. We have to speed up the way we connect and bring these new organizations, these new players with us. If we are talking about electric aircraft, we have to talk with the guys that are producing the batteries. We have to talk with the cities because the energy has to be there. We have to calculate, we have to see our grid. We really have now to step up with the action. And that's what we want to do right now, here, in this assembly, taking the decisions that we have to take, the courageous decisions in moving forward. We have to discuss our long-term goal. We have to discuss the measures that we have to get there. But make no mistake, the goal is already there. It's a sustainable aviation future. So, with that in mind, let me just announce that we just launched our 2019 environmental report. Is the 5th report that we have produced, and it tells the story of the last 3 years, the latest developments, talks about CORSIA, talks about electric aircraft, sustainable fuels, adaptation, which is a big issue for us as well, and I hope you really, really enjoy the reading. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your attention. I don't know how we are in the timing.
Any questions? Thank you, Jane Hupe.
Crystal clear. Thank you guys for your attention.